Sea Monsters Wear Tights by Rory Meyler. You've been asleep for hours, Tom says softly as he caresses his wife's hair. Kate's eyes open to meet her husband's above her. She's lying in his lap on the kitchen floor. My head's killing me, Tom. God, I can't even see straight. My eyes are stinging. She sits upright with difficulty, her body aching. And I had this really horrible dream. Ah, not another one of your dreams. I thought you were getting over them. The tablets I prescribed are supposed to stop all that. Well, maybe your tablets can't cure everything, Tom. This one was really weird. So weird that it was almost funny. She starts to laugh nervously. I was at the bottom of the ocean. You were there and you were drifting further and further away from me. And there was one sea monster after another, moving in and out of circles, dancing, waltzing like they were in a competition. That sounds ridiculous. But it felt so real. Like a scene straight from Bedknobs and Broomsticks. I could feel everything, the seaweed on my skin, the salt water on my tongue. Tom, would you get me a cup of tea? My throat's still dry from it. Tom walks to the sink, turns on the tap, but no water comes out. The water's not working again. Go to the bathroom. It should work in there, Kate says. My father was meant to get it fixed 20 years ago. It's always been a bit iffy in here. We'll have to get a new kitchen put in. Why didn't we go to a hotel? It's so cold in here. You wanted to come here. Oh, well, you know me and my ideas. I get such notions in my head. Don't know why I picked now of all times. The summer house should be left for the summer. In autumn, it's desperate. We need to light the fire at least. Kate ventures out into the hallway to collect the kindling and logs. Her childhood home somehow feels colder than usual, even for this time of the year. But she has her plans. She's going to revamp it, make it beautiful. The perfect holiday home for her children and their children's children. If only she could get over this desperate headache. Tom, why is there no wood in the basket? It must have been left that way. But it's always full. If that housekeeper's after taking the fuel, I swear. She goes to make a phone call. Tom, there's no phone here. What's going on? Did you move it? Oh, calm down, Kate. It's not worth getting stressed about. Your anxiety can't take it. Look, I'll sort it out later. No, I need to make a phone call now. It's the middle of the night. Tom, where's the sofa and the photos? She runs into the kitchen frantic. Is this some kind of joke? Mammy and Daddy's furniture. She's taken it, hasn't she? Who? What are you talking about? The housekeeper, the neighbours, I don't know. Somebody's taken it. Who knows who had a key? My mother was always trusting people. God, I can't deal with this. I need to lie down. Let's go to bed. Leave the cup of tea. I couldn't stomach it. She drags herself out of the room and plungers up the stairs, ready to collapse, leaving the day behind her. Tom sighs, bracing himself for what's to come. Her moods have been getting worse lately, and even he, a psychiatrist, doesn't always know the answers. He stands up, switches off the light and enters the hall when a sharp scream echoes through the house. Tom, there's no bed. Where's it gone? We've been robbed. Quick, we have to call the police. Kate bursts into tears and falls to the floor, her skin aching with the weight of her loss. Her parents' beloved possessions taken from her, along with them. Tom rushes into the bedroom and scoops her into his arms. Don't cry, darling. It's all right. I want to go home to Dublin now. I don't know why we came to this godforsaken island. We can't go back. There's no ferries tonight. We'll have to wait until morning. I said I want to go back. Now. I mean it, Tom. She runs down the stairs and heads for the front door. Kate, Calm down, you're having a panic attack. Kate's fingers grip the door handle, but it's locked from the outside. Someone's locked us in. The windows are bolted. Oh, Jesus, we're going to die in here. Tom pulls her close to his chest. Sit down, I have to tell you something. What's happened? We never made it. What do you mean? We didn't make it here from the ferry. Kate, I want you to listen to me very carefully. We're dead. What? Don't be so stupid. I'm not in the mood for games now, Tom. What are you trying to do to me? Not a game. Look at the calendar on the wall. What do you notice about the date? Sure, that's Mammy's old calendar. She probably just didn't change it. Wait. 1977, but that's 20 years ago. That means nothing. All right, well then, look at this. He hands her a newspaper. There's a photo of them both on the front page. Above the picture is a headline that burns her brain worse than the headache. Married couple drown at sea. Oh, God. Come here, my love. Oh, Tom, you're so cold. And so are you. This is a special day for us. We're allowed to come back once a year. This is the time we died 20 years ago. Stop it. She begins to cry uncontrollably. Tom, I'm so scared. It's okay. We're in heaven. What are you talking about? You know the sea monsters in your dreams? You never did like the water. You never did like the ferries. Because you were seeing what would happen. The 15-minute ferry ride we got on. That was our last moment in this world. We held on to each other for as long as we could. You were held down by rope at the bottom of the ocean. And then we woke up in this very bright place, a light room. And then suddenly people I'd known from years ago came all around, congratulating us that we'd made it. Like explorers landing on the moon for the first time, crossing over. People have been doing it for thousands of years. What about the children? I thought we left them with your sister. They're fine. But they're not children anymore. Eve has 2 children of her own and Michael has 1. And the baby. He's doing his PhD. She begins to howl in pain. No, I can't. I missed all that. I have to be there for them. You can be, but in a different way. We can go wherever you want, but only at certain times. Tom, you're scaring me now, really scaring me. Look, don't be frightened. She jumps up and tears at the window. Where there were once curtains, there were now only newspapers taped to the glass, concealing the outside world. She rips them off with anger and stares deeply. The lighthouse flashes. Oh, thank God. At least that's still there. I used to watch the lighthouse when I was scared as a little girl, and I'm scared now, Tom. I just can't accept that I'm dead. Well, we're here. You can't die anymore, even if you wanted to. Our body did, but we survived. Wait, if my body died, why is my head hurting? Why do I feel so nauseous? It's the quickening. You are feeling the life force like a baby kicking in the womb. You will, of course, get pain. Oh, Jesus. No, this is too much. Please don't cry, Kate. Everything I lived for, my house. I was going to do it up, my beautiful furniture. We don't need furniture. We've got each other. This world you're speaking of, I don't get it. I don't remember it. It's like that, though. The more you travel through to the other side, the more you get used to it. Over there, you just get on with things. Oh, Tom, don't tell me this. Your mum and dad? Ah, they're long gone. They're there with us too. Dead. Dead? Dead as doornails, 6 feet under. In Mexico, they celebrate us, you know. It's not the dark thing we've been taught. Look, you just need to accept it. Kate paces the floor and Tom tries to lighten the atmosphere by gently humming. What are you so happy about? Please believe me. We're in a really good place. We could have been somewhere else. What, like hell? Oh God, I have to get out. I've got to get out. I'll smash the windows. I'll go mad. Well, the door's open. But it wasn't a minute ago. Try it again. Kate opens the door and gingerly steps out into her childhood paradise. I have to see the summer garden one more time. The garden is dark but momentarily lights up with each flash of the lighthouse. It's 2:15 in the morning and it still somehow looks beautiful. This wall is my favourite part. It's encased in shells, every shell I collected. They each represent a bucket trip to the beach and back. I would race my sister in the knee-high dunes. The first person home got to choose where we'd place them on the wall. You see this conch? I found this. It's the centrepiece. My dad put it in the middle for us. We all had our bit of the wall. This was me, my sister, my baby brother. The big shells, that was Ma and Dad. Tom, I was so happy back then. I was so content to just sit in this garden and talk to the shells all day long. Ah, you're an awful old romantic, aren't you? Look at us, dead as dodos, but in our hearts we are as alive as the night sky. Can people see us? Some can. People with that extra ability, well, people I used to laugh at. Mediums, they can see us. Sometimes. Only sometimes. A lot of them were locked up by people like me. To everyone else, we're simply the garden breeze, that song on the radio, or the little robin on the roof of the Wendy house. You often hear people saying, oh look, that pigeon's my granddad come back. Do we look like pigeons? She begins to laugh a little. Listen, Kate, we're here. But we can't stay for much longer. We have to go back the way we came. You're really confusing me. I don't understand. How did we get here, Tom? On a bloody spaceship? We came through a special door hole. A tunnel. We have a sort of key, but we're only given it every so often. I want to see my kids. But Kate, there's a rule book. Every soul that leaves this world cannot kiss and tell. Even that dead crow under the tree over there wasn't allowed to say tweet tweet to the other birds. Are you telling me there's animals? Sure, everything's over there. Your old dog Molly, the one you had when we first met, she'll be waiting for you. Waiting for both of us. He holds her close as she whispers, sounds beautiful. We have to go now. He walks her to the edge of the old well. We have to go inside. That's where we came out of. Ah, Tom, stop. My brother went in there years ago and he nearly drowned. I still remember the wails of him. There's no water in there now. Because of your brother, it was drained. When you get to the bottom, you just keep falling, but there's no pain. You just fall into the other world. You'll be met by your ma and pa, and of course Molly. Kate's headache gets worse and her anxiety rages. I can't, Tom. Be brave, Kate. Look, we have to go one by one. First in, last out. I have to close the doorway. You must go first. Stand up there on the edge. The ground seems to shake beneath her feet. Ah, Jesus, my nerves. I'm having one of my attacks. I need one of my tablets, quick. The tablets are no longer needed, Kate. Tom raises his hands to push his wife when flashing lights cast over them. This time they're static, not like the ones from the lighthouse. Kate's holding onto the branch of the apple tree when everything goes foggy in her mind. A loud voice bellows, "Stay where you are, John Sutton. Put your hands up or we'll shoot." The voices melt as Kate faints and falls backwards. When she comes to, she's thrashing her arms and screaming as if she's in one of her nightmares. The lights make them stop. They're burning my eyes. They're so bright. Help! Where are you, Molly? Is that you? Ah, Jesus, she's hallucinating. Get her some water, would you? Says a blurred figure above her. I can't believe he got away, says another voice Kate doesn't recognise. Well, he hardly got away. Off those cliffs. He wouldn't have made that fall. Good riddance. No, don't hurt me. Kate swipes the water away as a hand offers it to her. She backs herself into the cottage wall, the shells digging in. I thought it would be beautiful. Angels, harps, trumpets. What are you talking about, love? Some heaven this is. Kate, you're here. You're not in heaven. You're still on the island. That man you were married to, he's a very bad man. You're not dead, but you could have been if we hadn't got you here. You're alive, see? The policeman pinches her gently. Ow, get off me. Where's my husband, Tom? His name isn't Tom, he's John Sutton, and he's a man wanted for murder. He drugged you. He's been mixing painkillers with anxiety meds, trying to make you go mad. He's married women all over Ireland. The others didn't get away. Did you notice, Kate, that a year into knowing him, you started to feel ill? Your nerves getting the better of you. Before she could answer, Kate overhears a different voice coming through the police radio. We've got him. Found his body washed up, wrapped up in seaweed and ladies' tights.
Leonora is late. The traffic was terrible, and the stupid fireworks. The stray rocket shooting across the road frightened the living daylights out of her. Why do people have fireworks for every bloody thing these days? The haze of poisonous smog lingers the next day like a bad hangover. Like the end of the world. At last she finds the narrow road through the hedgerows. It took some doing. She had to look carefully, aslant almost, to see the gap, overgrown with hawthorns. A slice of dark where her headlights found nothing. Leonora half remembers the area. Beyond the hedgerow is a wide expanse of open ground with a few spindly hazels and thorny shrubs. There are ruined walls and the broken remains of buildings, some of them very old. Leonora stops outside an old house, pulling her car onto the grass verge. Her sat-nav is no help. She guesses she has come to the right place. She has the invitation on her passenger seat. There is something familiar about the house, but nothing is clear. There are no lights at the windows, no lights in the porch. She was invited here. She had cursed as the brambles scratched her car in the lane. How the hell did the other guests come here? Surely there must be an easier way. Now she finds a gate, a lawned garden beyond, carpeted by leaves. Leonora stumbles up the crumbling path, almost comes a cropper in her high heels of the best boots she has. Surely it is not unreasonable to expect a light at the door, even just some carved pumpkins or some fairy lights. She expects a hint of the party going on inside. It should be at full swing by now. But nothing. No lanterns, no cheap battery-operated Halloween lights, not a crepe paper cat in sight. They expect her. Don't be late. We know you'll come. That's what it said on the invitation, made from some thick card, charred at the edges for effect. It ended with a smiley, winky emoticon. An X. Leonora listens at the door. Only the sound of air through an open keyhole. A dark space shaped like a sketch silhouette of a woman. It has a resonance, like she's a perfect fit. She smooths her long black skirt that flares elegantly from her cinched waist. With With her pointed hat, cloak and broomstick, she looks the part for a Halloween bash. She peers into the dark aperture. Leonora is sure that she can see flecks of brightness against the dark. Perhaps they're in the back of the house. Perhaps she should check around the back before announcing her arrival, just in case she's at the wrong house. She steps away from the door and looks up at the facade. It's ugly and lumpy with worn ledges. Shadowy faces of what look like gargoyles loom under the eaves. It's such a stereotype. A haunted house from a bad film. It gets more deformed the more she looks at it. She half expects bats to emerge from the roof, a roll of thunder, a crack of lightning. But the night is mild for All Hallows Eve. The sky is clear and the moon sails fair. She remembers something from a children's story. A witch's moon. Leonora walks as softly as she can along the front of the house. The path sputters out the further she gets from the door. The stone frontage radiates cold as if it had never been warmed by the sun, and the windows seem to draw in light rather than passively admit it. She cannot see within, nor is there a hint of a reflection. But it's hard to say if she could see anything in detail. The light is so dim and the air seems still hazy with smoke. Perhaps she can still hear the muffled thud of fireworks, see tiny sparks in her vision. There is nothing to indicate that the house is occupied. It's bigger than she first thought. The end gable recedes into shadow. A dense shrubbery, perhaps. The side walls rise heavily upwards into the gloom as if time has given up on it. The whole house seems bigger than it should be. Leonora stops, closes her eyes and listens. Perhaps she can hear the rustle and creak of trees, but it could be the sounds of her clothing, her boned corset creaking, her long skirt swishing. It twists around her legs and her bodice is clamped tight against her ribs, making her snatch at breath. She can feel her skirt snag on things in the shadows. Her boots are sinking into the soft ground. It's all such hard work. She wishes that she could stop and lie down. She closes her eyes. Why is she so tired? When she opens her eyes again, she finds that she's standing on grass beneath the clear sky, a bright moon above her. Leonora swears in surprise. The house is gone. She's standing on a lawn. But the lawn is part of an expanse of open ground. The cultivated grass merges into a rougher landscape strewn with stones and jagged projections. There are no landmarks, possibly a hint of light in the distance, a faint yellow band behind what looks like sparse trees and the shapes of buildings in the far distance. Is that the town? It's a long way off, further away than it should be. The sky is clear and clean. No fireworks puff lurid colours into the beautiful deep blue night. She wishes for something familiar and ordinary. Something soft and warm. A cat sits a short distance from her. This is silly, she thinks. Like a children's story. A cat, appearing from nowhere. but the cat's uninterested in her, as if it's unaware of her presence. Maybe it's not really here at all. The cat disappears. It leaves an impression in the back of her eyes, round top, flared below. She runs towards where it was, but she cannot run. It all feels wrong. And she spins, tangling her legs in her skirt, falls and ends up on her back. The stars are bright pinpricks of light, the backs of her eyes. Tut tut. A man's voice. Leonora. Silly. You nearly lost your way. Again. Man's voice. Again. She is not on the grass now, but outside the front door of the house, lying on the cold doorstep, looking up at the cobwebby porch light. A light is on in the hall. She can smell damp and something she can't quite identify, something earthy and strange. Burnt edges, music comes from within. A woman sings. You almost missed the party. Voices, men's and women's. Laughter, a violin, stamping feet. It must be a hell of a party. Why hadn't she heard it? People stand over her, legs. One set black-trousered, another set in a long purple velvet skirt. Skirt offers her a gloved hand. Upsy-daisy. The voice is deep, the hand is strong. Maybe velvet skirt is not what she seems. Leonora looks at a beautiful, perfectly made face. Costume party, of course. Despite the smooth skin, fine bones, delicate eyebrows, false eyelashes and lipstick, the face does not look feminine. Trousers is definitely not feminine. She is very tall and very thin and has pallid skin. His hands are preternaturally long and his nails rather darker than seems desirable. But velvet skirt takes charge. Silly Leonora, you could have got lost. Lost? Where the fuck was I? How do you know my name? Never mind, dear. You're here now. Just in time. A firework goes off over rooftops. A golden starburst and sparkles and crackles. It seems almost homely. In the hall, some of the guests wait politely. They smile as she comes in. She feels like a celebrity. They offer her a drink. Driving, she says resignedly. Sensible attitude, says Trousers. I can't take alcohol. Thins the blood. He laughs, but in a way that Leonora finds unpleasant. The house inside is chaotic, an incoherent assemblage of rooms and decor that cannot possibly match the exterior. It's as if everyone has made up their own part of it, like the mood board of a mad designer. They stand in a parlour with a huge fireplace, with an open fire that gives out no heat. The walls are covered in patterned fabric that shimmers like fish scales. The carpet is threadbare with cigarette burn holes. Leonora wishes it was a deep plush pile. She could take off her boots then. Her toes are losing sensation. She's led through to an enormous old-fashioned kitchen where people pour drinks from bottles, cartons, earthenware, pitchers and crystal decanters. The high dresser is stacked and hung from hooks with all kinds of drinking vessels, cups, glasses of many shapes. It's impossible to count them. Velvet Skirt smiles. Don't let him goad you. He has a bad heart. Yes, I got it scratched by a stake. Now I'm not sure if I'm undead or unalive. Glad that you could make it. You have a dark sense of humour. Great outfit. Leonora tries to sound enthusiastic. She has been to some extreme Halloween parties in her time. Velvet Skirt brings her a drink in a plain tumbler. Don't worry, it's harmless. All the taste, none of the waste. Yes, I've had enough frights even for Halloween. Nearly got brought down by a rocket on the way here. Close call. Velvet Skirt and Trousers exchange glances. The hazards of being a witch at Halloween. Now you must relax, Leonora. Time stops here. A group of men dressed as Vikings stomp through the room, singing ballads and raising huge tankards. They nod graciously to Velvet Skirt, who smiles beatifically to them. They exit through another door that Leonora hasn't seen yet. She can hear a woman shrieking with laughter. Beyond the parlour there is another room, much larger, more of a hall. The Vikings join a group of women in what looks like an old-fashioned holiday wear, singing Una Paloma Blanca, and each man carries off a woman over his shoulder, disappearing into the throng of partygoers. Bloody Vikings, Trousers laughs, as if she should know the joke. Film, stage, television, tournament, all kinds of entertainment are popular here. Puns are quite a thing too. A group of women dressed as nuns smile and waves a benediction over everyone in sight. Sound of music? Leonora ventures. No, they're real nuns. They never cease to bless us all. What happened to me outside? Velvet Skirt takes Leonora by the shoulders. You went to the no zone. A place of denial, dear. You do rather make a habit of it. A man dressed in a crown and little else declares some lines from Shakespeare's Hamlet. She thinks he is Hamlet, but laid bare. But she knows she's lost the plot. She almost laughs at her own punning. The drink is not as harmless as Velvet Skirt indicated. Leonora is warm and no longer tired. She feels ready to party. She starts singing, a song she learned years ago. Her mother used to sing, "These foolish things." She's sure that she heard a woman singing it earlier. An older woman emerges from the crowd and puts her arm over Leonora's shoulders and sings with her. Then another, of middle age, joins them until there is a large group of women, all singing in remarkable harmony. Everyone claps and smiles. Leonora feels happy. She tries to remember the last time she felt that way. A girl steps forward, dressed in a witch's costume, like Leonora is. She's pale and thin, reminding Leonora of someone she knew. We used to spend Halloween casting silly spells and eating marshmallows. We made a fire, remember? Leonora recognizes her. Tina. But Leonora thought that her friend had died years ago as an adolescent. In the witch's house, such a long time ago. But Tina, you died. You were so ill. Yes, but that doesn't matter now. Enjoy the party, Leonora. Tina's gone before Leonora can ask her more questions. She feels dizzy again. She must go home. She'll get a taxi. She has her phone in her bag. But there's no signal in the crowded room where the throng of people seems to stretch beyond her sightline. She sees a door and pushes her way through the crowd. Everyone seems to be having a good time. A nun asks if she wants her prayers. Thanks, but I really want a taxi. I need to go. Leonora is outside the house. It's dark again, the door closed. A few desultory fireworks flicker over the hedge. She walks down the path, a little disoriented, but her head is clearer. Perhaps she can manage to drive after all. Her car is where she left it. Oddly, there are no other cars anywhere to be seen. Hers is covered in leaves, as if it had been there for weeks. She brushes the leaves from the windscreen. It seems very dirty, as if smoke from the fireworks had left a greasy film. Her key seems heavy in her hand, but the door is open. She must have forgotten to lock it. Silly Leonora. Forgetful. She must take care. The key is awkward in the ignition. She has to waggle the steering wheel until it will go in, and it won't turn immediately, as if it is rusted. But she can hear the engine. She thinks the lights are on, but the battery must be low. They're so dim. She puts the car into gear, releases the handbrake, and the car is on the road, travelling so fast. A bright light. A heavy impact. All is dark. Leonora finds herself on the ground, outside an old house. A light is on inside the hallway, and she can make out the legs of people all around her. Silly Leonora. Late again. A man's voice. A hand reaches down. Oopsie daisy.
I will be reading Cold by Ana Canals. When I woke up, I was walking. I could feel the soft grass under my feet, but I couldn't see it. A thick mist surrounded me. Cold, so cold. I didn't know where I was going, but I kept walking, blindly. The soft fabric of my nightdress caressing my legs. So cold. I stopped. The mist cleared to reveal the jagged edge of the cliff. Rock against water. Sea breeze in my hair. So cold. For a moment I thought I heard a voice over the sound of the crashing waves. But no voice. There was never a voice. I stood there, looking down for what felt like hours, days. It's hard to keep track of time there. The water was so dark, so beautiful, so welcoming. I felt my breath quickening, my heart racing. I was ready. But it wasn't my time. Not yet. The next morning I get up as usual, late and tired. Cold, always cold. I go to the kitchen and make a pot of tea. The smell of sea salt on my nightdress doesn't even surprise me. Nothing much surprises me anymore. I step out into the garden, cup of tea in hand, and stand there in the morning light. Sunlight can't even warm me up now. With a sigh, I go back inside to my usual spot on the couch. I don't even bother to dress anymore. These days it seems like all I do is wait. My days pass in a haze, waiting for nighttime, waiting for the next time it comes and takes me away. It, she, they, it doesn't much matter what it is, only that it comes. One of these days, I won't come back. I know it. I've always known it. The corner of my lip turns up in an involuntary smirk. It's funny how afraid I used to be of that. Afraid of not coming back. Afraid of the dark. Now, every time I close my eyes, I hope it will be the last. And every time I open them, I am disappointed. You must think me morbid, but it's not my fault. I wasn't always like this. And before you say anything, I'm not suicidal. No. This is something else altogether. You see, I don't belong here. I understand that now. It's taken me a lifetime, but I finally understand. I've always felt it pulling me away, away from everyone I've ever known, everyone I've ever loved. I never really knew why, but I've come to realise it doesn't matter. This is how it has to be. As the moon hangs in the sky, I make my way to my room. This is my favourite time of day. The cusp between light and dark, between dreams and reality. In this liminal space, anything seems possible. Sometimes I wonder if this is where I belong, in the in-between. Neither here nor there. I make my way up the stairs in a daze. While I was lost in my thoughts, night slowly crept into my room. Everything looks not quite real in the moonlight, almost magical. I go to my dressing table and sit down before the mirror. I run my fingers through my hair, over my skin, my lips, as if I need to touch them to know that they're real, that I'm real. Still here. So cold. Not for long. When I wake up, I was walking. I still couldn't see, but I wasn't worried. I knew the way. I'd walked it countless times before. The familiar mist welcomed me like an old friend. The breeze had a chill to it this time, bracing. As I made my way to the cliff, I remembered something someone once told me. You can't die in a dream, you know. You just wake up. It's impossible. One more step, and I could test that theory. Just one more step. That's all it would take. I stood there at the edge, staring into the sea. Cold, so cold. I felt the grass graze my foot as I took that last step. I'd always known one day I wouldn't come back. I knew it from the first time I walked through the mist, the first time I looked into the sea. I should have known before. I should have known better. I shouldn't have followed the path laid out for me. I should have fought harder. I feel the corner of my lip turn up in an involuntary smirk. Who would have thought it after all this time? I was right. I should have been afraid of the dark. They found me. 2 weeks later, on a beach, a mangled heap of bones and skin. Not much left of me. The sea had carried me away like I always knew it would. Suicide, they ruled. Of course, there wasn't much point in me trying to explain to them that they were wrong, that they didn't understand. They wouldn't listen to me. They couldn't. I still tried, though. I tried to tell them that it wasn't my fault, that this was always going to happen. I had no choice. Right? When I woke up, I was lying down, stiff. I could feel hard wood under my body, but I couldn't see it. I couldn't see anything. The black was so thick, it was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I wasn't breathing. I tried to lift my hand, but it wouldn't move. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. I could smell the earth above me. It was so dark and cold. So cold.
A House in the Shade by Ishmael Ho. In the village where my grandmother was from, they say that children born without a shadow are unlucky. When a child is born, the doctor holds the child and checks for abnormalities, but the midwives know to check for the shadow. My grandmother often said that children come from the house of God, but they must travel through the valley of the dead. It's a long way. Sometimes when a child hurries on the way from the house of God, they forget to meet their shadow. Such a child would almost certainly not be favored by the angels. My grandmother was a midwife for many years, and she knew such things. She said such children were best given back to God. Such a thing was common in the days when my grandmother was young. My mother's younger brother was such a child. I had remembered all of this while looking at the pallbearers lowering my grandmother's varnished rosewood casket into the small grave, humbly hollowed out of the green earth of the churchyard. My grandmother was old. Her death was not unexpected. But watching her descend into the ground, I prayed that when she arrived at the gates of God's house, her shadow would convince the angels to let her in. My mother had cried silently when my father and uncles filled the grave shovel by shovel. Some months later, to honor my grandmother's final wishes, we traveled to the village where she was born. It's a small village in the mountains called St. Christopher. You may have heard the name. There's a famous festival in the spring where pregnant women gather to seek the favor of St. Christopher. It is well known among the towns in that area. My grandmother and her mother before her took part in it. My mother did too for her earlier pregnancies, before I was born. In the town of St. Christopher, the houses spring up like oddly colored mushrooms along a network of cobblestone streets and alleyways. There are old houses whose foundations have lasted through the decades and whose walls have heard the cries of babies born for centuries. The house where my grandmother was born and grew into a woman was built by her grandfather. It sits on the northeast corner of St. Christopher, to the west of the humble parish chapel and close to the outskirts of the town, where the cobblestones give way to the scrubland buffering the lowland forest which lead into the hills above. The house lies in the shadows of elm and cypress trees, planted over 100 years ago by my grandfather. It was always dark and cool there. I did not like this house when I was a young child, and I do not like it now. My grandmother's brother lived there with his own grandson, my second cousin, Theodore. I did not like them either. They were strange men with strange ways. Theodore was 2 years older than me, but small and crooked. My mother said that due to some accident, he did not grow well and could not leave the house. I supposed it was the accident that killed his parents. No one ever spoke of the accident. I'd always been afraid to ask why. Once, when I was a little girl, my parents took me to the house in St. Christopher. It was my grandmother's wish to see her brother and her great-nephew. That was the first time we met. I felt an innate revulsion. His stooped posture and crooked smile seemed sickly and weak, and when my mother made me shake his limp, sweaty, damp hand, something in me recoiled instantly. Later, my mother chided me for avoiding him as though she had not done the same. I saw her stiffen when she bent to hug him in the genial way that adults do things when they do not wish to do them. So when some 7 years later we met at the house shaded by the elms and cypress trees, my second cousin had grown. He was still short, but my immediate sense was not one of disgust upon seeing him. It was not one of great pleasure either. My great-uncle, however, had grown older and grayer in the years since I had last seen him. What I remembered as a tall man of sternly knit brows and dark eyes had given way to a body bent with age, supported on the third limb of a knotted elm walking stick. There was a milkiness in his eyes, and he seemed haunted by weariness and ill health. My mother had come to deliver some keepsakes of my grandmother's to them. He grimly accepted the withered, dog-eared journal and the small wrapped box that my mother offered him, and then led us into the house while Theodore hunched in the doorway. We had arrived on a Thursday, a week after the feast of St. Christopher had concluded. The house was, as I remembered it, dark and cool inside. The windows had been shuttered, and what little light there was came from small oil lamps and candles. Though electricity flowed throughout the house, my great-uncle did not allow electrical lights indoors. Combined with the low ceilings and narrow corridors steeped in deep shadows, the inside of the house possessed a choking, cave-like feeling. I felt that the oppressive darkness in the house had contributed in some way to Theo's unnatural shape, and now to my great-uncle's own bent frame. Looking upon them, it was hard to tell if they had made the house this way and not the other way around. I was given the room that was my grandmother's as a girl. It is a modest space where aged wallpaper printed with sunflowers dominated the gloomy walls. The single bed was clean but hard, and the pillows smelled musty. The room was on the eastern corner of the second floor, where the sun would have shone through the windows were it not for the oppressive cypress blocking it. The small shelves over the dresser held books and bric-a-brac covered in a thin layer of fine dust. Looking through these, my hand turned over an old ceramic powder bowl in which I found an iron key. Smoothened by age and blackened with rust, the key fit just so in my palm. It was too small for any door I could think of. Nevertheless, I resolved to try to find every lock I could find, for no reason other than to occupy myself until our business in St. Christopher was concluded. In order to settle some property bequeathed to them by my grandmother, my mother and great-uncle had to visit the offices of the family lawyers. As such, Theodore and I were left much to ourselves during the day. And so, systematically, I searched for every lock I could find on the ground floor, but none would open to the turning of what I had come to think of as my key. Creeping through the halls of the old house, the shadows clung to my skin like gossamer. From bent and dim halls to candlelit rooms cast in gloom, I slipped in and out, key in hand. Some locks were clearly too large, others plainly too small, but I tried them all. Having satisfied myself that only the cellar and upstairs rooms remained, I abandoned the dank shade of the house to take some air. Being a stranger in St. Christopher and not keen on walking the odd mile or so into it, I looked and decided to inspect the center of the modest yard. To call it a garden would be generous, given that no flowers or ornamental plants grew there. There was a small vegetable patch near the house, shaded from the scant sunlight that penetrated the crests of elms and cypress that grew thickly on the borders of the property. From the back of the garden, a thicker copse of trees headed northward, which came into an abrupt edge at a small escarpment, cut away by the small mountain stream that skirted the edge of our family's land. The center of the small garden was the only area where sunlight managed to fully penetrate the gloom of tangled foliage. It was there that I had elected to spend my afternoon. At first I busied myself circumscribing the patch of sunshine with pacing, and then marveling at my shadow's mimicry as I waved my arms and play-danced in the light. Having spent much of the time since we had arrived indoors, I had almost forgotten that I even had a shadow, and whether it was boredom or simply the newness of noticing it all over again, I delighted in watching it stretch and move, following my lead. It was a small shock, then, when lying in that patch of sunshine, that all at once I felt the alien disquiet of eyes on me. I tried to ignore the feeling, but it persisted, gaining, if anything, an uncomfortable intensity. All the morning I had spent indoors, Theodore had gone unnoticed, preoccupied as I was with my key and its errant lock. I had no notion of where he was, and frankly, I cared little to find out. I know it is uncharitable to describe my kin in such terms, but it is the truth. His presence was akin to the feeling of slippery seaweed around one's ankles at a high tide, the subtle pricking of disgust, and the disdainfully moist, lingering feeling of something not quite there. And like this, the sickly feeling persisted until, feeling self-conscious, I left the patch of sun and escaped to the shade of the trees. By the time my mother and great-uncle had arrived, I had largely forgotten the strangeness of the afternoon. Having heard the rumble of the car engine, I ran from the trees where I had taken refuge and went indoors. The sun was going down and the air was beginning to feel clammy. I didn't tell anyone about the key or my quest for the lock that it fit, and the adults seemed too engrossed with their business at the lawyer's office to care about what I had been up to. All the same, when they asked blithely what Theodore and I had done while they were away, I was surprised when my uncle turned his milky cataract eyes upon me with a certain knowing curiosity. Something in the way he peered into my face convinced me to omit the details of my adventures. I said only that I had spent some time looking around and admiring the garden. Almost from nowhere, Theodore's thin, reedy voice piped up as he materialized from some corner of the house, eyes a-glisten and his pale, wet lips near slathering. "That's not at all, is it? You've been busy doing something here and there, here and there, here and there." And then he began giggling to himself. "And what have you been up to, cousin? I have scarcely seen you all day. Where have you been skulking?" I retorted. Theodore's eyes narrowed at me, but a strange, half-pleased, half-pained expression crossed his face. "I've been around." He offered no further explanation, and following supper, we retired to our rooms wearily. That night, I dreamt of the back garden and the sunny patch in the middle. I imagined myself looking down at the garden from the attic window, watching Theodore sitting in the sunshine. Looking down, I found I had a small wooden chest in my hands, shut tight with a lock just the size for my key. Somehow I knew that once I opened it, all my questions and wonderings would be answered. But rather than pleasure, this filled me with an inexplicable dread. And yet, in the dream, I found myself reaching for the key in my pocket. That's the end of part 1 of A House in the Shade. Stay tuned for part 2.